Yeah, the 10 Alliance is a very important kind of alliance or network of organisations that all of which have seen the importance of socio-economic status being a ground in equality legislation. So by coming together, we work into the strength of all the organisations, all their backgrounds and so on, all the experience and knowledge on the ground and the policy level that the organisations have. We've been able to bring that together through the alliance and work together for change, hopefully with an outcome of making sure that socio-economic status is a tenant ground in our equality legislation. My name is Paul Ginnell. I work with the European Anti-Poverty Network Ireland. It's a network of about 160 local national organisations committed to the eradication of poverty, and we're linked to a European network as well. So a lot of our work is linked to that, is linked to the policy change that needs to happen in order to address the root causes of poverty and social exclusion. And that's the basics of it, really, in many ways, more challenging than you might think. And because poverty is a basic denial of human rights, and so a lot of the change that needs to take place is at a very fundamental level. It affects people's income, access to services, their chances of getting a job and the outcomes from that, and the participation in society more broadly. So that's what our work involves. I'm working a lot with other organisations. So adding socio-economic status as a ground would probably, hopefully, have benefits in relation to that, in relation to supporting, I suppose, change that would address the root causes of poverty. Socio-economic status is a really unacceptable form of discrimination, which is really not in our equality legislation currently, so which is not understandable really, in a sense. It's a very direct form of legislation, basically, on people's social background or class, where people are discriminated against just on the basis of that, of their accents, of where they're from, educational background, income levels, and so on. And because currently it's not included in our equality legislation, people can be discriminated against openly in relation to access to services, jobs, all parts of their lives, and it can be very direct. And because it's not in legislation, it means that people can actually do nothing about it. So that's why it's extremely important that it's changed, but for the individuals themselves and for the communities that are kind of for disadvantaged backgrounds, that for that community as a whole, it's extremely important that it's changed.
And could you say maybe a little bit briefly about what the equality legislation is?
Yeah, so currently we have 9 grounds in our equality legislation, or 9 and a bit, because housing assistance payments, the social housing payments, are included in it. And it's very important in 2 ways. One, in that it acts in a way that people who are discriminated against based on those grounds currently can take a case or can try and get redress in terms of that discrimination. It has to be proved, of course, but it's a way of them being able to bring redress in relation to their situation. And a second most important piece, and it would be really important in terms of socioeconomic status as well, is it aims to kind of address the culture which enables that type of discrimination to take place. So there's positive duties included in it, and the kind of public sector organisations have to be shown themselves to proactively prevent discrimination based on those grounds, and promote human rights and equality. So I think that's extremely important, not just in terms of supporting the individual and preventing discrimination on an individual level, but also as a societal level. It makes it unacceptable at a cultural level in society that the type of discrimination, all those types of discrimination take place. Mm-hmm. So for socioeconomic discrimination not to be included, it's a huge issue in terms of the individuals, but also collectively in terms of society and what's acceptable in the culture of society. It's extremely important, I think, because I suppose, and other grounds such as disability or even age, ethnic background, race, membership of the traveller community, gender, and other grounds, they very much intersect with socioeconomic background. And people who are often discriminated against because of other grounds, it's very much linked to their socioeconomic status, their address, their accent, their income levels, and so on, because they're living in poverty. it very much intersects with the issue of socioeconomic status and the other grounds that people experience it on. And currently in our equality legislation, it only enables people to take a case based on one of those grounds. It doesn't recognise, really, in terms of the cases, that intersectionality, or people being able to show that they're discriminated against because they're a disabled woman, or because they're a traveller who lives in poverty, and so on. That's not possible. So it would be really important if the legislation is changed, apart from, first of all, including the ground, that it recognises that intersectionality as well, which is obviously a kind of represents the reality of people's experiences in society. It's really important that at an institutional level that's addressed, in terms of that organisations such, for example, the health services, that if somebody approaches those services, the service will be set up and designed, and the culture of that service should be delivered in a way which respects everybody, irrespective of their background. So they have to have in place a kind of a recognition that discrimination, inequality and so on is a reality, but they're set up in a way and they're designed in a way which does not allow those issues to arise, in terms of how people, no matter who approaches the service should be completely there for them as an individual or family or community. So that's why it's extremely important that organisations, in terms of public sector duty, that they go through a process of actually reflecting on it themselves, and proactively working out how they make sure that their service is completely open to everybody, irrespective of background, and it takes away any possibility of discrimination or treatment of difference because of somebody's background. So that's why it's important. It's a conscious thing, I think, in a sense, that organisations going through that. But in terms of how a service is delivered, it should be there then for everybody, irrespective of their background, if that process is good. But unfortunately, currently it's not. And I think that's people's experience in many ways, that their background does seem to determine often how the service treats them, whether it's health or housing or social welfare system, and so on. So that needs to be addressed as part of the overall process. Basic human level, it's very destructive, of course, for people's sense of themselves, their rights, their community, their self-worth, their dignity. So on a very human level, it impacts on people immediately, and people's feeling of their inclusion in society. And that's why, from a poverty and social exclusion point of view, it's really crucial that this ground is included. And then that people have protection, that this system works. I suppose that's a real challenge for equality legislation even now for many groups, is that it often so difficult, even for groups that are included, to make it work for them and for their communities as well. So that needs to not just be in the legislation, but the legislation needs to be implemented. It needs to work. And then in the longer term, I think it's that cultural change. It's that it's called povertyism. That's a challenge that's addressed in society. So there's not just an improvement just for individuals. It's not up to the individual to constantly have to go who's discriminated against or feels they're discriminated against to seek kind of justice or redress. That the culture of services and the culture of society doesn't accept it. It becomes unacceptable, so that it doesn't happen. People don't experience the discrimination in their lives. So there's the immediate short-term personal side, and there's the broader societal collective kind of change that it can bring about as well, if it really works, and that's extremely important.
Yeah.
I think for many people who are, say, on an individual basis who are taking cases, it has to be reasonably straightforward. The process can't be off-putting, and I think people currently going through the process who are covered already find it difficult to actually take a case, and there are certain kind of reasons for that built into the process. So that needs to change. Another area is that currently in a state, the state is exempt in many ways, even though there's a public sector duty, that in terms of other forms of legislation that might be felt to be discriminating against, that kind of impacts on how services are delivered, that there's an exemption from the state currently under legislation, which means that people can be discriminated against by the state in its services and how they're designed because of that, and they can't take a case under that. So that needs to be removed. That exemption for the state needs to be removed as well, because while people experience discrimination on socio-economic grounds and other grounds, in private areas, access to shops and pubs and other areas in their lives and just on the street, in many cases, that it's also in relation to those public services they're accessing and how the law treats them, for example, in social welfare system and so on. So how the guards operate, how the prison system operates. So it shouldn't be exempt, basically, and the law needs to change to reflect that. And then intersectionality, is a key one. So people can take cases which better reflect the basis in which we're discriminated against, which often can be complex and multidimensional, kind of different parts of their lives being reflected in it. So all of those there's some of the areas that need to change. In some ways is that it's completely unjust that is not included. It's completely unacceptable, and it's been over 25 years now, a quarter of a century, that the legislation has been in place, and its socio-economic status is still not included as the ground for whatever reasons, and it's time for that to change. I think if people understood exactly how it's experienced by people and what impact it has, people would understand why that needs to happen. So at a political level, really, it needs to change now. It's going on far too long. People are being excluded far too long and often blamed for these situations themselves. But it's the system. So it's just time. It's just unjust, and it needs to change right now.